Hello and welcome to season 2 of UELtras here on Ranks FC, the show that talks you through Europe's most varied and interesting club competitions, the Europa Twins, both the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. I'm Jack Collins, and I'm going to walk through some of the most exciting ties as we get to the final round of qualification before the group stages of my two favorite tournaments, starting with the Europa League. It's probably worth pointing out here at this point that it's not always the biggest names included here. West Ham in the Conference League are not included, for example, but rather those that I think have the potential to end up as being the best contest. So without further ado, let's get going. Right, so in the Europa League, as opposed to the Europa Conference League, there are far less ties to choose from. As not only are there 6 Champions League playoff losers who will drop down into the Europa League group stages, but also 12 sides qualified automatically from their league positions in Europe, meaning that with the league path dropouts already locked down from that Champions League into the groups, we have 16 of the 32 sides already sorted in the group stage, exactly half. So what's most interesting in the 8 ties that we have remaining? I've picked out 2 to keep an eye on. It's a battle all in green and white as Irish champions Shamrock Rovers travel to Budapest to take on their Hungarian counterparts Ferencváros. Both teams here started in the Champions League playoffs, of course, as champions, with Rovers knocking out Hibernians of Malta before falling to Ludogorets. Fun fact, Ludogorets Razgrad, their name is an anagram, or Ludogorets bit is of good result. So I'm going to run with that in future, just talking about people having a Ludogorets. But whilst FTC dropped out one round later to Karabag, having put Slovan Bratislava to the sword before that. But maybe more than 2 champions going head-to-head or a similar colour scheme. This one has been fueled by a striking outburst from the Ferencváros sporting director. So Tamás Haynal said this week that his side's opponents play an unpleasant British style of physical football. Now, while there are no doubts that Rovers have been direct at times, this will have raised hackles, not least with an Irish side being referred to as British, but also considering that manager Stephen Bradley, I think, plays mostly on the deck and has implemented a progressive passing style, which has seen his side play some really lovely stuff in Europe. Ferencváros are, and rightly so, favourites on home soil and with more quality in their ranks. Under Stanislav Cherchesov, who you might remember as the Russian coach from their 2018 World Cup, they are a physically well-drilled unit with a fervent fan base backing them at home. But with European secure at this stage, the loser of this obviously drops into the Conference League group stages. Rovers have absolutely nothing to lose. They've already said this week that this one is seen as kind of a free hit. And if they can get themselves back to Tala in touching distance, they will fancy themselves to cause an upset over 2 legs here. Not 2 league champions for the second game, but 2 teams that actually will probably feel that they underperformed last season. The Violets of Vienna finished a remarkable 23 points behind Austrian champions RB Salzburg, whilst Fener ended 12 points behind Turkish champions Trabzonspor, which, considering the depth of feeling between the 2 clubs, will have stung. And being honest, the ill feeling has swayed into this campaign as well for these 2, although on slightly different levels. Fenerbahçe won 6-0 away at 10-man Kasimpasa on Monday, easing some of that feeling that persisted into the new season, because on the opening day, they drew against Umranyaspor, who've just been promoted into the Turkish Super League, at home. But even that is not as messy as their opponents, who sit bottom of the Austrian Bundesliga after 4 match rounds. Although, in fairness to them, this is partly due to the fact that they started the season on -3 points due to a licensing violation, whatever that is. They were cleaned out 3-0 at RB Salzburg on the opening day, and they also lost to Altak, who finished 3rd bottom last year. They finally picked up their first win against Tirol at the weekend. They also drew at home with Lask, who are nothing to be, sniffed at. Lask are a very decent side. But it does mean that this particular leg of this tie is intriguing, because basically what the season tells us so far is that Austria Vienna are desperate on the road. And so this home leg in Vienna is absolutely crucial if they want to stand any chance of qualifying for the Europa League. Fener, with a host of big names and who will be angry about not being in the conversation, at least, for the Champions League, will want to put this to bed early. And for this squad, which boasts the likes of Bright Asai Samuel, Josh King, Enner Valencia, Mergin Berisha, Diego Rossi, and young star Arda Güler, that should be the minimum expectation, to be honest. 2 clubs then who are desperate to get their seasons off to the correct sort of start, give themselves a lift, mean that this one, I think, could be a little bit tasty. And with that, we head over to the Conference League, which has far more games in place this week. Nobody qualifies automatically for the Europa Conference League group stages, which is kind of chaotic and kind of fun. It does mean there's an absolute bunch of games in this last qualifying round. The winners of each will, of course, be joined by the teams who fail to progress to the Europa League in those playoffs, whilst the losers drop out of European competition altogether for this season. So there's a lot of pressure on these games. I picked out 3 to keep an eye on. La Viola are on the verge of being back in Europe for the first time since 2017, but those 5 years have felt like an age for Fiorentina fans. And perhaps that's partly because having won the Europa League group that year, and with a squad that includes Borja Valero, Josip Ilicic, Fede Bernardeschi, Federico Chiesa, they crashed out of the round of 32 at that point. Obviously, that doesn't exist anymore, but in the most painful way against Borussia Mönchengladbach. They won the first leg 1-0 in Germany thanks to a Bernardeschi strike, then went 2-0 up at home through Nikola Kalinic and Borja Valero before conspiring to ship 4 goals without reply in a 16-minute period around half-time, and then fell through the trapdoor, could not get the goal that they needed. In very Fiorentina fashion, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And this side are desperate to right those wounds, which still are talked about today in Florence. Look, Vincenzo Italiano came into Fiorentina last summer after a brief dalliance with Gennaro Gattuso that ended in tears for everyone. But they played a really attractive brand of football under Italiano. They swashbuckled their way to 7th in Serie A last season, despite losing star striker Dusan Vlahovic to Juventus in January. And this summer, they've added some very smart additions, including Luka Jovic. Whilst Sunday's last gasp win over newly promoted Cremonese was not as smooth as they would have liked, I expect big rotations here with first-choice wingers, in my opinion at the very least, Jonathan Okone and Nico Gonzalez left on the bench for that one, perhaps with this game in mind. And I think that's relatively sensible because this is by no means going to be plain sailing. Opponents Twente under veteran Dutch coach Ron Jans were the best of the rest outside the Netherlands' Big Three last year, and they finished the Eredivisie season just 3 points behind Conference League finalists Feyenoord. They've won both their opening Eredivisie fixtures this campaign too, as well as dispatching Serbian side Čukarički, I think, 7-2 in the previous qualification round. Their 4-2-3-1 is likely to be spearheaded by Ricky van Volkswinkel. Remember him? And backed up by an intriguing cast that includes another former Norwich City man in Christos Zolis, who's on loan from Norwich right now, who's bagged twice the last time out in this competition. With Fiorentina's habit for making things difficult for themselves, I think this one has the makings of maybe the best game across either competition on Thursday night. In many ways, last season was a bit of a struggle for Maccabi Tel Aviv. As the most successful club in Israel, a trophyless campaign is something of a rarity. It last happened in 2017 and only 3 times in the last decade, but they were very much bested by namesakes and fierce rivals Maccabi Haifa, who won a double and triumph 2 against Maccabi Tel Aviv in the Super Cup. Now they face a gargantuan task to secure European football, coming up against a very strong Nice side and having muddled through qualification so far in many ways. They saw off Zira of Azerbaijan away from home, but they couldn't break the deadlock back in Tel Aviv drawing 0-0 before they edged through a really uncomfortable game against Aris Thessaloniki, and in the second leg, hanging on to a 1-goal advantage with 10 men after midfielder Dan Glazer was sent off. But here they are, and this squad is one with no lack of talent. Talismanic striker Eren Zahavi returned to the club after his spell at PSV ended, whilst Nir Biton, formerly of Celtic, and Croatian marksman Stipe Perica, who was their top scorer last season, are also in the mix. Georgi Jovanovic, the young Serbian striker, hit 9 goals in 16 games after joining in January, whilst Dan Biton, wearing the 10 shirt, has the ability to open up almost any game from his midfield role. For those youth aficionados, 18-year-old Oscar Gluck lit up the Euro Under-19 tournament this summer for his country as they reached the final, falling to England at the final hurdle. He's very much part of this squad, as is the man who played right back in that final, Roy Revivo. With all that said, though, they remain massive underdogs against a Nice side who, simply put, have talent to burn. This summer saw Aaron Ramsey and Kasper Schmeichel join a side that already boasted goal machine Andy Delort, the fluid trickery of Amin Gouiri, Kefren Turam's dominance in the middle, Youssef Attal, Calvin Stengs, Casper Dolberg, Pablo Rosario, and Alexis Claude-Maurice. I don't think I've even mentioned about half of what Nice have in the tank there. They did lose manager Christophe Galtier to the bright lights of PSG this summer. They brought in Lucien Favre to try and make this stellar attacking cast shine. But life under Favre has not got off to the flying start that they might have wanted. They were outplayed by Toulouse on match week 1, salvaging a draw thanks to Ramsey's impact off the bench, only to draw again to Strasbourg the following night. Strasbourg are a good side, but I think Nice would have expected to get more than 2 points out of their first 2 games. The Eaglets need a lift, a current under their wings, if you will, and they will see this as a perfect opportunity to do so. If they get going, there's no doubt that the club from the French Riviera could have one of the best and deepest squads in this competition, but they have to get there first. And this first leg in Tel Aviv, I think, could be a cracker. My final pick feels a bit like a Champions League group stage game, so for it to be a qualifier for the Europa Conference League is pretty remarkable in many ways. Both teams, though, came third in their respective divisions last year. Young Boys finished 16 points behind champion Zurich, and Anderlecht were well off the pace of Union Saint-Gilloise and Club Bruges, who would top the table in the regular season and then the championship stage, respectively. But change has been afoot in both camps. Young Boys appointed Rafael Vicky, who we last saw at Chicago Fire, of all places, after David Wagner was fired in March of last season, and Vincent Kompany's departure from Anderlecht this summer has seen him replaced by Felice Mazou, the man who oversaw Union Saint-Gilloise's charge up the Jupiler Pro League last season. And Mazou has started relatively well, picking up 5 wins from his 6 games so far, thanks in part to the form of Wolves loanee Fabio Silva. The Portuguese youngster has rediscovered the shooting boots that we'd seen on display in Porto's youth ranks, with 5 goals and 2 assists in just 332 minutes for his new club. Talk about hitting the ground running. Mazou has seemingly reverted to a 3-5-2 using Silva in a pair, letting the midfield 8 off the leash, which should see the best of young Belgian star Jari Verscharen, and also getting former Southampton and Lazio man Wesley Hoyt to help guide a young but supremely talented defensive line. The highly coveted Francis Amuzu holds down one flank, while the other has alternated between more attacking and defensive options, depending on the opposition. Over at Young Boys, things are going well also. With the season already 5 weeks in Switzerland, they sit top of the Super League, winning 3, drawing 2, and conceding just once in those 5 games. Their qualifiers haven't caused them much trouble either, dispatching Liepāja of Latvia 4-0 and then Kups of Finland 5-0 to get to this point. It's not bad going. And despite losing leading marksman Jordan Pefox-Sabachu to Union Berlin and Wilfried Kanga to cross-city rivals Hertha Berlin, they have been in good goal-scoring nick. Jean-Pierre Nsame, who spent last season on loan at Venezia, for those of you who watch Serie A, has returned to lead the line with 5 goals in 9 games, while Cedric Itten, who's on loan from Rangers, has started to chip in too, notching 5 assists so far, alongside a couple of strikes of his own. Vicky seems to have settled on a 4-4-2 with a diamond in the middle, which allows the 2 aforementioned strikers to build that relationship at the top of the park. Loris Benito and Lewin Bloom appear to be the first choice fullback combination, needing to get forward to provide this side with wits, while the versatility of Vincent Sierra around that defensive diamond sort of plays on either side or in the 6 role has allowed them to mix and match and become a little bit more defensively cohesive as games have gone on. Keep an eye too, though, on Cheikh Niasse, who will play at the base of that midfield, I think. The 22-year-old Senegalese joined the club from Lille in the winter market at the start of this year. I think it was just as February started, and has been extensively scouted by Brighton before, which is usually a sign of a player waiting to hit the big time. So 2 sides in cracking form with new managers and very interesting squads. I got a good feeling about this one. That's all for today on UELtras, looking at the games I think might be the ones to watch on this Thursday night as we creep ever closer to the tournaments proper and the draws for those group stages. If you've enjoyed this, please drop us a like and subscribe here on Branks FC, where there's loads more videos on loads more things. I promise it's just not just about these 2 competitions, although I will always be back doing UELtras before UEL and UECL match weeks coming very soon. As ever, thank you for watching UELtras. Please share this with any other lovers of these 2 brilliant competitions, and I will see you next week for the second legs. Enjoy whichever games you decide you're going to watch. Take it easy.